Let me take you back to a forgotten era, a time where dark, intense, incredibly well-animated films from Japan began steadily making their way over to the US and warped and changed our little minds forever, opening us up to a whole new different kind of world to experience that we could have never imagined watching animation. A time too where vampire media was at its peak and we had a lot less Jared Leto in our movies, and a lot more D. I keep telling everyone I meet in their lives that things would be better if they had a little bit more D, and I am here to give you guys as much as I can, because back in the early 90s we got to experience this little film from Japan entitled Vampire Hunter D. Originally released in 1985 and based on a series of light novels from Japan, it was directed by Tui Ashida, known best for working on other classic 80s anime like Fist of the North Star. He made this dark, gothic fantasy that is just such a wild ride to watch. Violence, action, dark atmosphere, vampires and monsters galore, and a little bit of life lessons thrown in there as well. I'm trying hard to make sure these classic films are never forgotten, so make sure you check out my anime review playlist for a lot of similar content such as this. I've reviewed Ghost in the Shell, Akira, Wicked City, and a bunch more. But real quick before I get into it, I just want to take a minute to talk about the sponsor for this video, which is Skillshare. This is an awesome video learning service that offers you a ton of valuable content in order to help you get better at whatever artistic or practical endeavor that you're trying to achieve. It doesn't matter if you're a beginner, somewhere in the middle, or advanced, there are courses of all kinds available to guide you towards your goals. Simply search up whatever it is you wish to improve on, and a variety of learning video courses will pop up. Click on the ones you think are most valuable to you, and you're set to go. Each course is broken down into segments, so if you don't have time to watch all at once, you can do so at your leisure. This way it fits around your schedule and not the other way around. I've watched through a few myself, including ones on making better thumbnails for YouTube videos, and another one on Sony Vegas by Storm, which is the editing software that I use, and it helped me learn a few new tricks that I can use towards making better content for you guys. So if this sounds like something you would be interested in, I do have some links in the description below for you to use. The first 1,000 people to use the link in my description box or my code, which is just Real Life Ryan, will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. I'll leave that on the screen for a moment just as a reminder to you guys, but make sure you check that out and give it a shot. It's definitely something that I think is a worthwhile service to have, and you can always use it to discover something new as well. So I want to thank Skillshare once again for sponsoring this video. Really do appreciate it, and onwards toward the video. The first Vampire Hunter D movie has a plot as basic and simple as vampire movies come. However, the characters and the atmosphere are dripping with so much style that the simplicity melts away, and it just becomes a unique piece of art that I think all anime and horror fans should experience. The world actually takes place in the future, but is a standard post-apocalyptic kind of vibe, uncertain if humanity did it to themselves or if it was done in part by the monsters that now ravage the earth. Demons, vampires, and beasts of all kinds are now the biggest threat to humanity. And though some technology does remain and is pretty useful in combat, the creatures of darkness are far more powerful and cunning than to be done in by it. Opening the film is a young girl named Doris, and she seems adept enough at killing and hunting monsters, but when she comes face to face with an ancient vampire, Count Magnus Lee, he decides that he wants her to be his bride. She is bitten by him, but not fully turned over yet, so she seeks out an experienced vampire hunter, and that's where we meet D. A stone-cold badass, a man of few words, and a skilled warrior at fighting demonic creatures. He accepts and becomes Doris's protector and a bit of a mentor figure towards her and her brother. Now, the vampire lore in this movie isn't exactly explained in heavy detail. I have not read the novels, and I am not an expert in Vampire Hunter D at all. So I may get a few things wrong, feel free to correct me below, but I kind of really like the idea that they don't explain much in this movie because it drops us into the world with such little exposition that it helps the world feel more lived in, and that this is just something that humans now have to deal with and be aware of. As far as I can tell, just being bitten by a vampire will not turn you over completely. In most vampire lore, there is a blood swapping process that must happen in order to turn someone. As in, the vampire drains you of almost all of your blood towards your death, and in your final moments you drink their blood, which infects and then reanimates the body upon your death. And I imagine that's probably a similar thing that's happening here, but here in this lore, killing the vampire that would sire you will save Doris before she is completely turned. Pure vampires are also called nobles, and Magnus Lee is a very proud and ancient noble vampire, stating that he can turn others into pure nobles like himself, which I'm assuming would be the blood-swapping ritual, but I don't know for sure. It's not really important to the movie to know the intricacies of how vampires are made, but as a huge vampire fan, I'm interested to know all the rules in this universe. So please, any viewers that are well versed in the Vampire D lore, please let me know how the entire process works. But the important thing that you do need to know in this world is that vampires can procreate with humans, creating offspring hybrids called Dampires. And that is what D is. Half human and half vampire, D lives in neither world and is instead a loner that travels by himself. He has many of the strengths and benefits of a normal vampire. He has the speed, heightened senses, healing factors, all of that. But he also has a deep bloodlust, so he tries to distance himself from others, thus explaining the stoic loner persona. In his mission to help Doris, he still tries to stay away from her, and as she sees him as sort of like a savior and an escape from a doomed fate, D is trying hard to control himself from giving her his D. No, but really. He is haunted by his vampiric desires, which lead to him detesting the pure nobles even more, and making him fight even harder. His parents are not explained in this movie, like many other things. We just go along for the ride, slowly discovering the various abilities that D has. He's a skilled swordsman, a great tactician. Oh, and he also has, a talking hand that sucks up shit, and is sort of like a combination from the hand from Parasite and Miroku from Inuyasha. No, really, he has a talking hand. Another thing that comes out of nowhere and is not explained is that D's random evil hand is that it's sentient, it constantly talks shit to him, and it's also independent in that it can move and attack even when D is unconscious. In fact, the left hand even seems to be able to revive him after he was staked in the heart. Considering other traditional vampire weaknesses are at play, like sunlight, I would assume that this would be a killing move. But I guess all you need is a nice left hand to eat up some dirt and then wake you up. No, but really, I am at a loss about this hand thing. It torments him, but it also helps him in battle. Maybe the hand is just trying to ensure its own survival, and so it will help him fight when it's needed. But there's only about 2 scenes where D actually uses the hand, or should I say the hand uses D? I'm not really sure. Anyway, it's just another bizarre addition to this movie that's probably explained more in the novels, but just from watching the film, it feels like something similar to a demonic infection or tumor, something attached to D that he just can't shake or ever remove. Maybe it's some kind of vampire STD, who knows? And maybe that's why D didn't want to enact his bloodlust towards Doris. He didn't want to give her that handy. Doris isn't by herself, though. She also has a younger brother named Dan who is determined as anyone to see that she is safe from the vampiric overlord. I just now realized all the 3 main characters in this movie's names begin with D. Interesting. Dan doesn't get annoying or overbearing, and he's actually a pretty brave little character. And there's actually a really powerful and profound line in this movie that's an exchange between him and D. I'm not sure I can show you the clip with dialogue because, YouTube is horrible when it comes to copyright stuff. But essentially, Dan starts to cry, and D tells him, it's okay to cry. It's okay to let your emotions out however you need to. But do not cry in front of Doris. That Dan needs to be strong for his sister. He needs to be her rock and to show her by example that there is hope and light in the world for her. That sacrifice of holding back around her to benefit her life is part of growing up and being a man. And I love that. I really love that. It's a harsh and maybe a controversial lesson, but it's one that I think men can relate to and understand. No good comes from breaking down in front of the person that you're supposed to protect. It's a sense of honor and duty, and despite how we feel, we must be brave. Not just for us, but for those that we love. I also have to talk about this other character, Greco. He's this cheeky, creepy human guy that wants to get with Doris, but she's not having it. He's not in the movie very much, but there's this moment. I gotta spoil it. So skip ahead in this video to this timestamp if you don't want to know. But anyway, there's this moment where he has this artificial light that mimics sunlight, and it's very painful to vampires. And he tries to rescue Doris, but only so that she will get with him and so that he can smash her. Typical. But look, this guy, he's an asshole for sure. But then Dan sneaks up and literally blasts him off a cliff, falling to his grisly death. And I mean, hey, I hate this guy too. But did he really deserve such a brutal ending? That's crazy. And literally no one cares, and no one ever mentions it again after it happens, which just makes it 10 times funnier. I laughed my ass off when I rewatched this scene because I did not remember it at all. It's just so abrupt and random, and then he's just gone. I don't know what to make of it. But of course, one of the main draws of this movie are the fights, and they happen sporadically throughout the film, and they give us a good look at several different monsters other than just vampires as well. The way they are dispatched is fun and brutal, but compared to some of the other old school anime that I've reviewed, the gore isn't really that crazy here. And don't get me wrong, there's a few moments where the intensity of it is high, but it's usually quick and not heavily detailed. There's also very little nudity in the movie, which might be shocking for an 80s horror movie. Only one brief glimpse at Doris. There are these 3 demon babes that we see for a little bit, but then they turn into snakes, so I hate when that happens. Once again, it just goes to show us that there's no such thing as free titties. Overall, this film is a nice little throwback to a forgotten era of anime, where the style and atmosphere really draws you in, and it feels like it needs to be a movie that you watch at midnight with your friends, or alone in a dark room discovering the possibilities of animation at a time where these adult stories were much harder to get a hold of and actually watch. I really do enjoy this movie, and although there's nothing about it that really stands out that would make it one of the greatest of all time, I do think that it's a worthy addition if you were collecting classic 80s and 90s anime films, and one that is worthy of going back to revisit. Now, I'm sure some of you are going to ask if I'm going to review Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust, released in the year 2000 by Studio Madhouse, and yes, of fucking course I am. Far more brutal and arguably much better animation than its predecessor, Bloodlust will be next on my list of films to tackle, so don't worry about that. For now, though, if you have seen the original Vampire Hunter D movie, let me know what you think about it below in the comments. Did you watch this one evening in the 90s when you were way too young to see it, or did you discover it more recently? Also, I apologize to any D aficionados out there if I got any of the lore wrong. I'm just trying to piece together what this movie gives me, so that's what I'm going by. Go ahead and like the video if you guys enjoyed it. Also, don't forget to check out Skillshare link down below in the description. Like I said, if you use my link or code, you will get the first 30 days free, so go ahead and give it a shot. Also in the description, you will find the links to my Patreon merch store if you want to support the channel that way, and various social media links where you can follow me. Other than that, guys, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll talk to you next time.